Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Suelisha Shobe from the Advancement and Alumni Relations Unit. We have another webinar series for you today. It's Mastering the Interview. It's going to be facilitated by Miss Gita Winter, right? And um, you guys have to keep in mind that we are going to be running this series throughout the year. So this is not the first and this is not the last one. So you just have to keep in mind or okay, 1 second. Right. I'm going to introduce our speaker for today, Ms. Kita Winter. And okay, all right. Gita has 16 years of broad recruitment experience. She is one of less than 10 people on the continent to hold an individual staffing master designation. She's currently a board member of the recruitment industry governing body. She's very passionate about youth development and empowering people with the knowledge and skills to succeed. To this end, she founded Recruiters Care to give recruiters a platform to make a meaningful change. The floor is yours, Ms. Gita.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hello, DUT. This is the second session of this year. So is there, or possibly are there people that may have been here last week when we did the personal branding workshop? Anybody here from that did that one last week? Yes. Okay, good. Lovely. Welcome back. I'm glad I didn't put you off too much. Okay. So if you've done some workshops with me before, I say it all the time, the more you participate, the more you get out of it for yourself. The more questions you ask, possibly the more you help other people in the group because they're likely to have some of the same questions as you do. The interview module is one of those that it is a talking kind of exercise, interviewing. And so the way that you show up in this meeting, the way that you engage here, certainly will help you when you're prepping for interviews or almost like an interview practice, putting yourself on the spot, talking in front of people. It is all very, very useful skills in terms of the interview process. So today, please feel free to stop me. Sometimes I can't see your names. I can only see initials and a hand, but I have no objection to you stopping me in the moment if you have a question. In fact, I actively encourage it because sometimes when we leave it till the end, we forget the context or we forget why we actually wanted to ask in the first place. So I genuinely don't mind. Stop me whenever you need to. Happy to go back a little bit, but we also need to be mindful of the time. So without that, I'm going to share quickly and then we can go. Right, can everybody just let me know, or anybody please let me know that you can see the slides? And we all see slides? Good. Thank you very much for that. Okay. I don't follow the slides slide by slide by slide because like I said, this is a section that's best discussed rather than reading slides. So if there's something I've missed on the slide, please don't worry too much about it. You won't have missed out anything, but we will get through everything in the best possible way. So before we start, let's talk about all things interview. So if anybody wants to be brave enough to unmute or to stick their hand up, let's take an idea. When do you think an interview starts? There's no right or wrong answer. We all have different opinions, but when do you think an interview starts? Yes, you're welcome to unmute and go ahead. I can only see your initials, GK.
Hi there, ma'am. How are
Hi,
you?
I'm well, and you?
I'm doing good. I think an interview starts as soon as the two recipients start greeting each other.
In the interview? So like you and I were talking, we just here, I say, hi, how are you? That's the interview starting.
Yes, that's when the interview starts because afterwards
Okay.
then that's when they would start asking questions about why
Cool.
you're here or your skill set and etc.
Fabulous. Thank you for your input. Appreciate it. I saw another hand up, ST, I think it was. When do you think an interview starts?
Hello.
Yes, hi.
I think an interview would start off with both recipients like I don't know, there has to be like a mutual agreement. What's you like maybe it has to be arranged somewhere nice like a restaurant or the business in question. And then they would greet each other and then it's important to give like a firm handshake or something. And then that's when like the questions will happen.
Yes, that's good. Thank you very much for that input. Anybody, if you two could please put your hands down so that I can see if they're new hands or not. Anybody else have a different idea of potentially when an interview would start? Anything
Hi, Miss
different?
Gita.
Hi.
Well, I think the interview starts when you receive that call, that invitation to the interview.
Mm-hmm.
I say this because in the past, when I'm invited into the interview, usually they start the phone call interview just to ask you questions, to get to know you better, and
Mm-hmm.
then they invite you into the interview.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. Thank you for that. I think there was Chris as well. Chris, what do you think?
Um, Good evening, everyone. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'll be wild with my thoughts. I agree with everyone what they said, but I wanna try this one. I think the interview starts when you preparing your application to be invited to that interview. I'll run my thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I tend to agree. So none of you are wrong. Absolutely none of you are wrong. But in reality, we are always on interview effectively. And you are quite right. So from the time that you do your application, we are already, and but when I say we, I'm talking about recruiters, talent managers, hiring managers, whomever it is that you are submitting or applying to. The interview starts then. From that moment on, we are already assessing you relative to the job spec, how you engage, our culture fit, what our requirements may be. So it is all part of the process. So if I say to you, and we touched on this in the personal branding one, let's say as a recruiter, I put out an ad and I say, please send your CV and your transcripts to this email address using this subject line. And you don't do that. I'm already looking at that going, okay, well, I see that Geeta did use the right email address, but she didn't attach the transcripts and she put IT graduate as the subject line when I said, please use IT grad / Durban. So now I immediately start thinking, I wonder if this person listens carefully, follows instructions well. Maybe there's something there. So I'm already making a judgment call based on you sending me your CV. The very next thing that typically happens, and somebody mentioned this, I pick up the phone to phone you to have that initial screening call. That is 100% part of that interview. I'm listening to how you answered the phone, how you greeted me, how you sounded, how you engaged with me during that phone call, how you responded to my questions, because all of that starts to, coupled with how you applied, starts to give me an indication of what you're like as a potential candidate or applicant for my role. And let's say then I like what I hear and I set up some time. And now there's two scenarios. It's either I invite you to a virtual Teams, Zoom, Google Meets, whichever, or I invite you to an interview in person. If you're being interviewed in person, your interview never stopped. It now includes what happened at the security boom when you arrived. If I told you to bring your ID and you didn't, okay, there's a little bit of things, you know, we all make mistakes. But were you rude to the security person? When you arrived in the building, how did you treat the receptionist? Did you try and be pleasant? Were you polite? Did you know who you were there to see? That all, you never ever know whether the hiring manager asks the receptionist for feedback. So you need to remember you're always on spotlight throughout the process. Then the receptionist says, go and have a seat. You go and sit, you pull out your phone, you slouch down in the chair, you're scrolling on the thing. How do you know that the interviewer wasn't watching? How do you know that the person that's going to take you to the room isn't the person sitting down next to you? So your demeanor and your behavior in the waiting area can also be part of your interview. But if you're doom scrolling on your phone instead of paying attention to your surroundings, if I, as the interviewer, walk up to you, don't notice me, I have to go and catch your attention, and then you have to put your phone away, sometimes ungracefully get up from the chair, try and then start to shake my hand. You've already made an impression on me in that instance. The moment we go from the reception to the interview room, there's a whole walk of silence that sometimes happens, or that very uncomfortable, all staring at the numbers ticking past in the lift. You've missed a valuable opportunity to set a tone, to have a conversation, to show that you can engage with people, to show that you can make small talk, to demonstrate your observation skills. Or I happened to notice how happy people seem to be when I was listening in reception. Or I love the layout of your offices. It is looks like such an inviting space to work. That is part of your interview. When you come into the room and there's already people there, they are watching and observing, you are being interviewed. Or when the person leaves you in the room and you're sitting there on your own and other people walk in, how you react in that moment, part of your interview. It all speaks about your brand. And it is things that very few of us really, really take into consideration as early on as the application. So what I want to say in a nutshell is, from the minute you apply or from the minute you see the vacancy, don't write interested on LinkedIn, follow the instructions. Make every single engagement meaningful as a way to demonstrate who you are and what you are as a potential employee for that business. Any questions, comments on this before we kind of move on to how to prep? Let me maybe ask it this way. You're in the room alone. You've got the pick of all the seats possible, and you can sit anywhere. Where do you sit? Or there's already 3 people in the room and you walk in. Where do you sit now? And do you think it makes a difference? Yes.
Yes, it does. It does make a difference. You can't just sit anywhere.
Where would you sit?
In front of them.
In front of them. Okay.
Yeah. Or maybe I can just ask them, where should I sit?
Okay, good, fair enough. And if you were in the room alone, and where would you sit then? If you were the first person in the room, where would you sit then? No takers? Okay. I always recommend sitting where you can face the door, as close to the door as possible, so that when interviewers come in the room, first of all, you notice them. And second of all, it's not an awkward kind of leaning over the table or trying to maneuver the chairs to stand up and to shake their hands or to greet them. So small things matter, and I'm just saying be very mindful of it. Okay, so this is kind of where we are in the process. You've got an awesome brand, you've been noticed, you send your CV, you've now got an interview. The interview is really just that. It is a step to starting the job. No guarantees, absolutely not a move that you can get past if you haven't nailed it. So if we thought the rest of it was important, arguably this is one of the most important stages, because you can undo amazing work in your branding and on your CV by not balancing that with how you conduct yourself in an interview. Okay. And an interview can't be winged anymore. And I want to give you some real stats. So, and you guys can go and check on my LinkedIn if you'd like to. About a month ago, I advertised a SEMA graduate position. Within the first 30 minutes, I had 700 applications. By the time I got to my desk the next morning, I had 2,900 applications. And in total, and I'm still getting them today, even though on LinkedIn I said update, this position has been filled. Up to today, I probably got about 4,900 applications. So to put it into perspective, I am spoiled for choice in this market, in the youth graduate market. I don't have to battle to find candidates. Candidates are easily come to me. But what that does mean is that I can pick and choose very carefully who I interview. And in that interview, because I've got so much choice, I have a very good chance of picking and choosing the exact candidate that meets my brief. So if you wing an interview, if you don't spend time prepping, I promise you now, you'll find it very, very difficult to move past this to an offer stage. Okay. So let's have a look at what research is going to help you structure and get ready for your interview. You're going to notice that in some of the sections, you'll see that little AI button at the top. For every one of those, I've written a prompt. And for those of you that have stayed to the end and specifically engaged, and what I will share those prompts with you so that you have something to work with when you're interviewing next. But let's have a look at what we should be doing. And the first is understanding what is expected in and for the role. And those things are very, very, very different. What is expected in the role are what duties, responsibilities, tasks are you expected to do. And that is on your job spec. So you obviously then need to read that job spec line by line by line. If the job spec is 5 lines or 5 pages, you really, really need to spend time unpacking that job spec line by line by line. And then for the role are all the things around that. So you might say this candidate must have, and it lists a whole bunch of requirements. Or you go and research and it says that it is a tech-forward company. So for the role would then suggest that you need to be tech-savvy, that you need to be very comfortable in utilizing new technologies and almost be the early adopters to some of those things, because that's what the environment requires of you. Does anybody not understand the difference or want to use different examples? Because I think it's an important one, because in an interview, they're going to test you against what's required from it and for it. Anybody want to talk about it? LM, you're welcome to unmute.
No?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
No? Okay, BM, looks like you've unmuted. Did you want to add something, ask something?
No, point that guys. Way.
Or could you maybe mute, please?
Now, Pam.
Could somebody mute her, please? LM, you've got your hand up. Did you want to ask something?
No, Miss, I
Okay, no worries. Thank you for that. Okay, so when you've read the job spec line by line, you also want to look at it compared to your experience, because the interviewer invited you because they see something in you that matches what is required. But really what you should do is for every line and requirement on that job spec, you should go and say, where did I do this? To what degree did I do this? How often? What context do I have? What tech did I use? Was there a process that I had to follow? What volumes of this did I do? And where did I do it? And then possibly, is there a transferable skill? So have I done, say, a bank reconciliation, but they asking for a creditor's reconciliation? If you're able to do reconciliations of financial data, it's probably much of a muchness, and you can switch between them. Because if you haven't prepped to that degree and they go, oh, I see you've done bank reconciliations. Please talk me through the last 4 you did. And you don't know that, or you haven't thought it through, you don't want to be caught out. The next thing you want to be doing is, who will you be meeting? Now, I know many of you might say, but I don't get told. You need to take responsibility for that too. So if you get a meeting invite, very often under the scheduling tab of that meeting, you'll see who was included there. That is probably the interview panel. And even if one of those people aren't there, you'd rather be over-prepared than under-prepared. So go and check them out. Go stalk them on LinkedIn. Go and look them up on social media, because who you'll be meeting is very, very important. Couple of reasons. First of all, you'll be able to recognize them, hopefully, unless their picture is 20 years old and 200 kilograms lighter. But maybe you'll recognize them. That's prize number one. The next thing you'll do is you'll be able to understand their background. Where did they come from? What university did they go to? What did they study? Where did they work before? How long have they been in this organization? And that could be helpful, because let's say you're applying for, a marketing position. And you can tell that Joe Soap, who's going to be interviewing you, went to the same university as you did. They've worked at a marketing agency, a big corporate, and now this company. Their frame of reference could be broad. So they may know what it's like to work at a big corporate marketing. They maybe understand what it's like to work in a small agency and now at this company. So you'll know that they have a lot of depth to their experience, and you'll know a lot more about them and how they may ask you questions. So as an example, a person who's only had one job for the last 15 years, and you want to go, you don't want to say to them something like, oh, can you tell me about your growth experience? I mean, they've had one job 15 years. Okay, so it helps you to kind of prepare about that. But it could also help you say to the same person, I noted that you've been in the same organization with a lot of growth and movement over the last 15 years. What keeps you here? What about this organization has been that meaningful for you? That would be a better understanding. You then want to know, who do you know? So when we talked about personal branding, we talked about strategic networking and making sure that you are connected and networked with the people that will help you. So you really want to now go and tap into that network. Do you have LinkedIn connections that work in the organization you're applying to or interviewing for? Because they could be a wealth of knowledge. They could go and tell you what it's like to work there, what the culture is like, what you might expect in the interview process. They may give you a very useful tip to say, dude, it's going to take you 30 minutes to get through the boom and security, so leave enough time so you're not late. Those things could be very, very helpful. And if it happens to be somebody who has the same role as you, then their insight could be so valuable. So my best advice is always go and see who you know and how they could potentially help you set yourself up for success in this interview. But this, of course, means that you have to have networked extensively leading up to this, not a quick exercise. So every time you apply for a company or you see roles in the future that this is a company I would really like to work there, start building a connection base right now so that a year from now, 2 years from now, you have something to work with. Don't leave it until you're in November of your final year. I promise you it's too late. You then want to go and have a look at brand and culture. Now, brand is what's on the website. It's also on their social media stuff. It's what's in the news. It's what they do. It's what products they sell. It's who their competitors are. It is where they position themselves in the market. You want to know this stuff. And you also want to know what the culture's like. Now, I see a lot of Google questions, which quite honestly, I'm going to say to you, please don't ask this one. What is the culture in this organization like? Because let's be honest, which hiring manager that is paid for by the company who is tasked to employ new people is going to go, this is a terrible place to work. I'm interviewing you, but please don't come here. Never ever is that going to be said in an interview. So when you ask questions about culture, you're unlikely to get an honest answer, but you should also know this. How do you know this? Network. How do you know this? Go and look at their socials. Are they posting pictures of events? Are there people regularly showcasing learning and development they've received? What corporate social initiatives do they do? Where do they give back? How do they show up for their communities? That is the culture of a business. You can tell a lot by LinkedIn. For argument's sake, you can see what the average turnover is. Is there a department that only seems to keep people for 3 months? Could be a red flag for you. So go and do a lot of research. Looking at the website is not enough any longer. And if that's all you do, I'm going to say to you now that you are doing yourself a serious disservice. Then you want to go and have a look at company data. So listed financials, audited financials, sorry, listings on JSEs. You want to go and have a look at what their board looks like. You might want to see their leadership team. You could want to understand their their international footprint. You need to be armed with as much data as you can. And then the best way to do this, you need to plan for the answers and then you need to practice out loud. So I'm going to talk you through how to plan for the answers as we go, but the talking it out loud sets you up different. So record yourself on the phone, play it back. You can hear, am I waffling? Am I taking too long? Am I giving the same information over and over using different words because I'm trying to fill up space? Do I how do I sound when I'm answering?
Also, internationally, there are countries. That's why I've said earlier on that as per the question, original question, that some cadres who have gone outside the country to train.
Sorry, I think you're not talking to me. Okay, we're muting. Okay, thank you. Practice out loud is incredibly helpful. I want to give you, I'll give you an analogy, right? You're going to have an argument with your girlfriend, boyfriend on your way. In our heads, we have worked out that argument down to the last sentence. We know exactly what we're going to give it to them when we get home. When we get home, it comes out different. And after, I should have remembered to say this. Practicing out loud helps us assimilate that information. It comes out better. There is a site, mockinterview.co. It does simulate interviews with you. So you put in the job spec, you put in your CV, it asks you a bunch of questions. You record your answers, you can listen back. So it can be helpful if you feel weird talking out loud, or you don't feel like you can mock or role play with your friends. Any questions on this before we move on? Important section, no prep, not good. Less prep, not great. Over prepped, very busy. Very good thing, over prepped. Anybody have questions, or can we move on? 3, 2, 1. Okay. Right. We've said this already, and we talked about it just now. Your interview extends beyond the room, how you communicate, being on time, including assessments. If you've committed to doing something either before or after the interview, you need to do it, and you need to do it before it's due, not after it's due. If you're going to be late for an interview, you don't let anybody know when the interview starts. You let them know proactively as long before as humanly possible, because that just shows better timekeeping and reliability. And then we've covered the rest already, so I'm going to skip that. Okay. Things to keep in mind, how you greet people. We talked about it earlier. Somebody in the group mentioned a very firm handshake. If you, unlike me, I'm really not good with names, but if you can use the person's first name, that is preferable in an interview. So rather do that. If you're shocking at it, keep a notebook, write some names down where they're sitting in the table. Very good. It's a good thing to do. It personalizes it. You want to be mindful of your body language. So if you're sitting up straight, if you're constantly crossing your arms, if you're fiddling with your nose and your ears, you need to be watchful of that. You need to be, body language also includes eye contact. I know for a lot of us, it's cultural to not look somebody in the eye because it is respectful, but business corporate etiquette is generally maintaining eye contact. So you need to bear that in mind. Your body language also includes your pitch and your tone. So if you speak incredibly fast when you're nervous, you need to start practicing how to pare that back a little bit, because it does definitely have an impact. And then the last thing I want to say to you is, do not rely too heavily on AI. AI is fantastic for some of the prep work, but we have to be mindful of how it overinflates us. So you may have said that you passed all of your exams. AI could have given you an answer that said, I've had an exceptional academic study result. Now, when somebody says to you, what is exceptional? And you go, oh, you know what, I passed with 50%. It might catch you out. So just keep things just to keep in mind. Right. Anybody in this room interviewed before and has come across the tell me about yourself question? Anybody? Ever had an interview before?
Yes.
Okay. And did you get the tell me about yourself question?
Yes, sir.
You did. It's so common. Almost every interview starts with tell me about yourself. And let me give you, after having interviewed for 16 years, I've probably interviewed thousands of people across thousands of different levels in an organization. I can tell you that more than 90% of people start this the same way. My name is Geeta, and I grew up in Johannesburg, and I went to Sandringham High School, and then I went to university, and then I started working at Liberty, and after Liberty, and it's like, okay, but I saw that on your CV. So what is that telling me about yourself? Remember, if I go back to we spoiled for choice in the grad space, you need to stand out immediately from the get-go first interview question. And that is your positioning statement, how you open and set the tone for the rest of your interview. So if you are repeating what's in your CV, not going to help you. What we want to know is what makes you unique. What makes you stand out from the 5 other people I potentially interviewed? What are you saying to get me to sit up and pay attention? You really want to demonstrate your skills and knowledge. And here I'm not talking about at Liberty, I did this and then I did this and then I did this and I also did this. It's not that. It's about where do you excel? Where are your strengths? Where has your knowledge and application of it created value somewhere? And if you're a grad and you haven't worked in a lot of places, we need to find those opportunities to express what makes you stand out. And I say this all the time. You have more than you think. You just have to frame your experience differently. So we'll talk about that now. If somebody wants to give me an example, we'll talk about that now. And then you want to talk about how you think you'll add value. And you're going to know this because you've done your research. You're going to be able to say, this role requires an element of data accuracy, even if you're just if you're applying for a data analyst. But what you did was data capturing part-time in a hospital. Why would that be relevant? Because you can't get it wrong. You can't capture a patient's ID wrong or their diagnosis wrong or any other important information. And you may have done volumes of data capturing. So you're able to work with large quantities of data sets. That is different to a student who perhaps hasn't had the same experience. But unless you position it that way, I'm not going to understand it that way. So it's how you think you'll make a difference to me. And it is so important because I'm looking for what you bring to the table. How are you going to make my team better? So if you consider yourselves, right, and you go to the store, and I'm going to use it from a, let's go TV. You go into a store, you're looking to buy a TV. There's all these banks of TVs. That's just like having a choice of candidates. You stand there and the shop assistant comes to you and you go looking for a TV and he points and says, there it is. Duh, I know that. I can see it's a TV. But which of these TVs is going to serve my need? So it must be this size. It must be a smart TV. It must be whatever it is that you're looking for. Unless the shop assistant tells you that, you're not inherently going to know. So in this environment, you need to tell me what you want me to know. And then we are positioning yourselves better. And then you want to align with their culture. So it may say this role requires somebody who's analytical. But if you're thinking about a data analyst as a position, analytical is kind of a given, right? But it may be that the big data set, or it may be that you have a interest in continuous development. So you've done a SQL course on the side or a Python course on the side. That might align with their culture of continuous self-development and improvement. So you really need to find the ways to connect the dots yourself, rather than my name is, I grew up in, I went to school, and then, because that adds no value. Anybody want to talk about this one a little bit? Because it is the one that gets you started. If you are boring here, you may have already lost somebody. So anybody want to ask anything about this or give me an example and I can help you reframe it?
We have a hand up. We have E Mapanga. You can ask the question.
I think it might be an old hand.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. I wanted to know, let's say you do not have much experience, for example, in the data analyst position, but you have like maybe a teaching experience and then maybe a little bit of an administrative experience. How would you answer that question?
Okay, let me ask you this. What are you studying? So what are you busy doing at the moment?
At the moment, I'm doing my PhD in business information management.
Okay, so genuinely IT. Okay, cool. So it's a real one. Okay. And
Yes.
what kind of roles would you ultimately be looking at? Because it's a broad, it could be development, it could be analysis. So what are you ultimately hoping to do?
Okay, so I first did office management and technology. So it means that I'm going to be looking into administrative jobs. And then I did my master's in management sciences in admin and information management. And then shortly after that, I got an opportunity to be a lecturer. And yes, so in my
Okay,
experience,
give me an ideal job title. So when if you apply for a job today, what would it be?
I'm not sure. That's where that's where it's
Okay.
confusing, because I can also be a research assistant.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
So let's say you're going to use your experience to be an insights analyst, right? So you're not a data analyst, you're not going to create databases and that stuff, but you're going to use information in a business to set up the use of information better. Okay, so let's use that. One of the requirements of that role would be to engage with stakeholders. Now, it could be stakeholders who are the business managers who might understand the space, but it could also be users who don't really understand it. They do the operational stuff. They don't really think beyond that. The fact that you've got an administrative degree plus an information sciences or information management degree helps you span both of those worlds. You understand operational administrative things, but you also understand the information side of it. Your teaching or lecturing post, as an example, could be very helpful because you understand how to impart knowledge and how to answer and field questions from somebody who doesn't have the level of knowledge you do. So in an organization, when you're dealing with multiple stakeholders like that, that experience could be very, very valuable. Do you see what I mean? You've got more than you think.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much.
Okay, super, yay. I thought there was another hand. I think it was SB, if I remember correctly.
Yes, yes. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm a graduate student doing operations management sciences, and then I applied for a tutor position, whereby I was asked what impact have I made. So I found it difficult to answer that question because none of my answers did satisfy the interviewer.
Okay, so sorry, I heard you were in information. You were also doing IT, but what role did you interview for?
I was interviewing for a tutoring position.
Sorry, you got such a lot of background noise. Just shout. Use your mom voice. Scream at me.
All right, so I was applying for a tutoring position.
A tutoring position. Okay, great. And you're a third year student. Okay, let me ask you this. In the first 2 years of your studies, did you ever work in group assignments?
Yes,
Okay. During any of those group assignments, did you ever have to help one of your teammates with their components of that project?
absolutely.
Was that not tutoring?
Well, that's why it. I also provided the answer that I did help some of my fellow students during extra classes, but still it
Okay.
wasn't enough.
Okay, but the question what was the impact you had? That was the task you did. So the impact was that those students then passed or exceeded their expectations because of your tutoring. Do you see the difference?
Yes,
Okay. All right. So that again also could have been used in a tell me about yourself question. I have in the past tutored a number of students and assisted in group projects where my impact, which is how you'll add value, was X, Y, and Z. You would have had that one nailed potentially. Okay. Let me give you an example. So I'm going to give you some context. Oh, sorry, I see another hand. Let's quickly do that. I think it's NM.
Thank you, Ginta, for the opportunity. Good afternoon.
Hi.
This is Ndando Mbele. So I wanted to come in there and try to give you an example of how I think I would approach the question. Tell me about yourself, and then you guide me if I am going about answering it the correct way.
Okay.
So for an example, so I am a tourism professional or practitioner, if I can put it like that. And so here is me answering the question. So I have a degree in tourism management, and some of the modules that I did and that I have knowledge and understanding includes tourism marketing, include tourism practice, and then I also have practical work experience, which I gained through in-service training and internship. Yes, yes. So that's how I approach the question. Thank you.
Okay, that's not a bad start, but let's go back to the criteria for a good positioning statement. You didn't tell me what makes you unique. You told me what every other tourism graduate has done. Okay. You also didn't tell me how your internship or any of those modules may add value. So a better answer could have been, I was an intern at a travel agency where I was exposed to X, Y, and Z that I think would be very relevant carrying forward into this role for this reason. In addition to that, I managed to consistently get distinctions in these modules during the course of my qualification. What this means for you is that I believe that I am naturally talented in certain areas, which for you in this task may see value. Do you see what I mean? It's really digging into what specifically you are good at and where you excelled.
Oh, yes, yes. Thank you so much for that. I think I do understand. And I think the important part is also to mention some of the projects, because I did a great
Yes.
project during my internship. So what I would need to do is to get deeper and explain that I've done maybe I've developed an extensive tourism database. I've developed an accommodation guide. Those are some of the examples of
Yes.
tourism projects that I did. So that would go into making me, showing what makes me unique.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Those are very valuable things to add. Just bear in mind that you can't have an answer that is 5-10 minutes long. 2 minutes is kind of a good thing. But you can invite them to ask you additional questions or touch on them in other parts of the interview. We've given some examples, so I'm going to skip this. Right. There's very often in an interview, especially for grads, strengths and weaknesses questions, because there isn't a ton load to ask you, right? So your strengths need to be about you, the whole person. There's more to you than just your technical knowledge. And if you read most job specs, there's a to-do list and then there's a should-be list. The candidate should be this kind of person, attention to detail, and must be able to do X, Y, and Z. So when you're talking about your strengths, you really want to think about it in terms of your technical knowledge. So what parts of the job spec am I really going to be good at? Where does my prior related experience come into play? And what about that is going to help me to be more productive quicker in your space? Then there are your soft skills. Now, you don't want to say I'm a good communicator, because what does that even mean? You want to talk about specifics. So let's go with that data position. Analytical ability is a soft skill, But how did you use that as and to know that it's a demonstrated strength? So you could say something like, I've worked with large volume data sets in the financial space where I had to work with tens of thousands of lines a day. It required strong analytical ability because I had to be able to spot anomalies, variances, duplicated data, which I consistently was able to do in that time. That's talking about a soft skill. Let's go with that tourism example. A soft skill in tourism could also be, strangely enough, problem solving. So I want to go to Mauritius. I want to stay there for 7 days. I think I need to X, Y, and Z, but you know that it isn't going to fit in my budget. You know that it is not going to work. Your problem solving ability meant that you could come up with different packages that would still address my primary needs and be able to sell it to me. You've solved that issue for me. That's a good example. What did that mean for the business? You've made a deal for the travel agent. That's an amazing opportunity. And then always have an example. Nothing speaks louder than the actual story. And interviewing is nothing but storytelling. So have an example all the time. But if you go back to the prep where I said, read the job spec line by line, know where you did it, how you did it, in which sequence you did it, using what tools, you will already have examples for almost anything they ask you. So that covers your strengths. Don't give one. Give a technical strength and a soft skill, because that is what the spec requires. If the job spec only listed technical skills, go a little bit light on soft skills and a little bit heavy on the technical knowledge, because that is what they put out. So that is what's meaningful for them. Always take guidance from that. Cool. Let me give you an example. Let's put some context. You're applying for a graphic designer position. The company that you're applying to sells technical products. It is a multimedia environment, which means that it might be print media, actual catalog, and digital media. So it might be a website catalog, e-commerce, and it's an extremely competitive space. So if I were going to talk about my key strengths, and given that at a grad level you may not have much, here's what I would say. I have excelled in many of the modules related to graphic design throughout my qualification. But more importantly, I took a marketing elective, which really sets me up for understanding how my designs translate into a marketing or a product marketing medium. More than that, I also worked as a sales consultant to supplement my income during my qualifications in a car parts business where I was exposed to technical products and had to very quickly understand how different these product sets may be. When these are all combined, I genuinely believe that I would add much value to your business from a design point of view, because I understand both the products and how this will relate to your marketing teams. That would be an example. Any questions on this? Just want to check the time. Okay. Okay, let's go with areas of development. So sometimes it's asked as what is your area of development? Sometimes it's asked, what do you think your weakness is? Now, you want to be you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot, right? So you're applying for a graphic designer and you don't want to go, you know what, actually, I don't know how to use any design tools, because then you're definitely not going to get the job. So,
Yes,
but you
sir.
do, yes.
There is also another question in the chats.
Okay, I can't read the chat. If you wouldn't mind reading it for me, please.
Okay. T. Tamela said she has work experience that is related to the job description as a key strength, or is having work experience that is related to the job description a key strength. Actually, it's a question.
No, it's not a key strength. It just makes it easier for you to understand it. A key strength would be how you executed in that experience. So did you get commended for something? Were you given complex projects? Were you did you get put in a team where you had to do more volumes? The strength is how you do it better than somebody else, or how you'll make it better when you get there. The fact that you've done it could be the same as 3 other people that have done it. A strength is how you did it better. Does that answer the question?
For me, it does. I hope for Tamela it does too. Thank
Okay,
you.
cool. We can always go back to it. Okay, areas of development. You need to be honest. You have to be authentic in your interviews, but you don't have to tell everybody everything. So let me give you an example. I am genuinely good at people-facing roles, but I am terrible at admin. But if I were going to apply for a recruiter position again, there's a big component of admin in every recruiter role. So if I went and said, I'm absolutely dreadful at admin, I'd probably talk myself out of a role. So you could, I would rather than go, whilst I'm very strong in client-facing roles and I have a very good ability to bring sales to the business, admin is something that I don't particularly enjoy. It does mean that I get it done. It might just mean that I will get it done the last thing of every day. So I'm being honest, but I'm not blurting it out. But you can also stick to things that can be achieved. And at this point in your careers, that is almost anything. So you're very lucky now. So let me give you, there's an example on the next screen, and I'll talk you through that one. Please try and avoid personality weaknesses unless you are pressed to give one. So for me, it would be patience. Now, patience, I don't know how to say no. I'm a perfectionist. Those are all stock standard answers that everybody gives. Not going to get you to stand out at all. Maybe true, but also really a problem. Personality weaknesses also open you up for bias. Let's say you apply and you're impatient, and that's what you were going to say. Your hiring or the hiring manager could say, oh my goodness, I worked with Geeta a few years ago. She was also impatient. At month end, when there were deadlines, she made everybody cry because she was so demanding. I don't think I can deal with another Geeta. You may not be anything like me, but that bias has already planted a seed. You can't change who you are. I can be patient for a while, but at some point, that is coming out in the workplace, and the manager can't manage that. So when I say stick to things that can be achieved, let's say you are applying for that tourism role, and in your previous role, they used a specific software package, but the company you're applying for does not use that software package. You would be able to say, I have never used X, Y, and Z, but I have used similar packages and was very quickly able to pick up because I'm tech savvy. I don't believe that given a training manual or some oversight that I would not be able to pick that up very quickly. Or maybe you haven't used a specific methodology. Let's say you're in manufacturing or in process improvement, and there's that lean or Kaizen or one of those, and you haven't used it, but you've been exposed to it. It's just not a strength. You could say, I have a fundamental theoretical understanding of it. I've done projects of it. I've never used it in a workplace, but if I had to, this is what I think I would do. So be as selective as possible, as honest as possible, and where you can, stick to things that can easily be taught or picked up on the job. I've used this in example. I used the previous one for the tourism one, so I'm not going to do that one. Right. Competency situational based questions come up all the time, whether you think about it or not. Those ones that go, give me an example of a time when, or talk me through how you go about, or how would you deal with a client that is screaming blue murder? Those are situational competency-based questions. Scenario-based situations to see how you would react, manage, or deal with them. And there's a few. So you really need to listen very carefully in the interview to see which one they're actually asking you, because the way that you answer it could be very, very different. So there's a process question, explain the steps to create an invoice as an example. Or it could be, talk me through the process of when you join a new project. What is the first couple of things you would do? Behavioral ones are conflict management, stress management. It could be dealing with something that you don't know. How do you behave when you don't know something? It could also be, talk me through the steps that you take when you realize you've made a serious mistake. How do you deal with that? Those are behavioral questions. And then methodologies is processes, tackling projects, problem solving, physical methodologies, agile methodologies, waterfall, lean, Kaizen, 5Y, whichever actual steps or formal processes that you were required to do. Now, they may not be common ones. They may be ones that were previous employer specific. That's okay. All they want to do is to see that you are able to follow a process, and that's what's important. Right. There's a STAR method. Anybody here heard about the STAR method? Hands up who hasn't heard about the STAR method, know nothing about it. You've heard about it or you haven't?
I have heard about it.
You have. Okay, cool. All right. Excellent way to tackle interview questions, specifically competency-based questions, and should be, and when you see it, be part of your prep. That thing about where did I do it? How did I do it? What complexity to do it? Who did I need to do it? What did I follow to do it? If you've gone through that process early and now you use the STAR method, you'll absolutely be ready for any question. And there's even a guideline at the bottom as to how the weighting should look. So the S is for the situation. It's the context, because I don't understand when you come home, you go, Mom, you won't believe what happened at varsity today. And you give me the story. That's the S part. So without understanding the concept, the context, and the situation, I'm not going to be able to relate to the rest of your answer. 20% of the whole answer needs to be there. So it's very important, but not the most important. The next thing you want to talk about is the task, the problem, or the challenge that you were responsible for. Not we, the team, not me and my manager, you. What did you need to do to get the situation sorted? That's only 10% of your answer. It's a very quick overview of your function in this situation. A is the actions you personally took to reach the end. This is where your opportunity is to set yourself apart. You can talk about what you needed to do outside of the task. So I had to meet a deadline of X. What did I need to do to achieve that? Did I need to delegate? Did I need to renegotiate other deadlines? Did I need to get help? Did I need to get other data to enable that? So what are the things that you needed to do? But now's the chance for you to highlight skills, character traits, where you had to dig deep to achieve this. Those are your opportunities to stand out. So if I went, there was a client that was screaming at the call center and I had 20 other calls buzzing, but I had to calm the man down, and then I had to escalate the query, and then he was happy at the end. You answered the question, but did you set yourself up? No, not at all. So a different way to look at it would be, there was an extremely irate customer who I happened to be the third caller he had spoken to for the same question in a matter of half an hour. He was absolutely beside himself by the time that I got that call. My job in that instance was to assess his issue, even though 2 other callers had already done that. And I needed to find a resolution. That's quick 10%. What did you have to do? I told him, and I gave him the space to vent. I told him that while he was calling up, I pulled the previous call records. I could see what he had said previously. I could see that the calls were dropped. I affirmed what my understanding of what was required of the company in this instance. I made 2 suggestions to the client, and I asked him which one of those would work better for him so that I could escalate the issue more effectively. What was the result or the outcome? The customer was transferred to the correct place. I later followed up to ensure that his question was adequately resolved, and he thanked me for my patience and being able to be the person that got